Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if changing your habits can actually change who you are at your core, like your personality? Well, this new study might have a surprising answer, or maybe it is just telling us something we already know in a new way. So, this paper is a bit of a commentary on another study. The original study looked at mindfulness meditation, which many people use to feel calmer and more focused. They wondered if practicing mindfulness could actually change someone's personality, specifically if it could make them less neurotic. Neuroticism is basically a tendency to worry, feel anxious, or get upset easily. The original researchers thought that mindfulness might help by changing something called cognitive fusion. Now, what in the world is cognitive fusion? Think about it like this. When you have a thought, especially a negative one, sometimes you get so caught up in it that it feels like reality. You fuse with your thoughts. So, if you are having a thought like, I am not good enough, cognitive fusion is when you get stuck on that thought and it feels like the absolute truth. The original study suggested that mindfulness meditation helps people not get fused with their thoughts, and this in turn reduces their neuroticism. So the pathway they proposed was mindfulness meditation leads to mindfulness, which leads to less cognitive fusion, which leads to less neuroticism. Sounds pretty neat, right? But the authors of this paper, Stefan Pfattheicher and his colleagues, say, hold on a minute. They think the original researchers jumped to conclusions and that we should be much more careful about what this study tells us. They point out two really big issues that make the original conclusions questionable. The first problem is that the main ideas being studied, mindfulness, cognitive fusion, and neuroticism, are just too much alike. They're so similar, it is hard to tell them apart, both in what they mean and how the researchers measured them. Let's look at the numbers. In the original study's data, the scores for mindfulness and cognitive fusion were super strongly related. A correlation of -0.75 means that when people reported being more mindful, they also reported less cognitive fusion. That is a pretty strong connection, even stronger. The correlation between cognitive fusion and neuroticism was 0.73, meaning when people had more cognitive fusion, they also tended to be more neurotic. And mindfulness and neuroticism were also strongly linked, with mindfulness scores going down as neuroticism scores went up. These numbers are really high for things that are supposed to be different concepts. When they tried to correct for any measurement hiccups, the relationships between these ideas got even stronger. This suggests that maybe, just maybe, we're not looking at three different things, but more like different ways of describing the same thing. To show you what they mean, let's look at some of the actual questions used to measure these things. Here is a question. I get upset with myself for having certain thoughts. Does that sound like being neurotic, or like getting fused with your thoughts? Or like not being mindful? It is tough to say for sure, right? Or how about this one? I see myself as someone who worries a lot. Again, is that neuroticism, or cognitive fusion, or low mindfulness? And one more, I find it distressing thoughts and images so unpleasant. I have to distract myself and not notice them. All these questions seem to be tapping into the same general idea. Someone having a tough time with their negative thoughts and feelings. Because the questions overlap so much, the scores overlap too. And that explains those sky-high correlation numbers. This is like using different fancy names for the same thing. It can create confusion, and the authors call this the Jangle fallacy. It's like calling a dog a poodle, a terrier, and a mutt. They are all dogs, but you gave them different names. When constructs are so similar, it is hard to say that one causes another when they might just be describing the same underlying experience. So, when the original study claimed that cognitive fusion explains how mindfulness affects neuroticism, these critics say it is like saying that your tendency to not have negative thoughts. Mindfulness affects your tendency to have negative thoughts, neuroticism, because of your tendency to have negative thoughts. Cognitive fusion. It sounds a bit circular and doesn't really tell us much new. The second major issue these authors raise is about cause and effect. The original study used what is called cross-sectional data. That means they took a snapshot of people at one single point in time. They asked them about their mindfulness, their cognitive fusion, and their neuroticism all at once. When you have a snapshot like that, it is really hard to say what caused what. Did mindfulness practice cause less neuroticism by reducing fusion? Or could it be that people who are naturally less neurotic and less fused with their thoughts just tend to say they practice mindfulness more? Or maybe there is something else entirely that influences all three. You can't establish a clear cause and effect relationship from a single snapshot. To truly understand cause and effect, you'd usually need studies that follow people over time, or studies where you actively change something, like having one group meditate and another group not. Even though the original paper acknowledged that cross-sectional data has limits for proving cause, the authors still used language that implied a causal pathway, like influence. This can mislead readers into thinking there is a stronger causal link than the study design can actually support. So, what do these results tell us then? These authors suggest that the findings are consistent with a very common pattern. People who experience more negative emotions or are more neurotic also tend to report being less mindful and getting more caught up in their thoughts. That makes a lot of sense intuitively. But they argue the original study doesn't actually provide evidence for how meditation or mindfulness causes a change in personality or directly leads to better well-being. The most honest takeaway, according to these critics, is that mindfulness, cognitive fusion, and neuroticism are just very closely related. They overlap so much that it is really difficult to tell them apart using the common measurement tools. What would be helpful is more research that carefully tries to figure out where these concepts do differ and uses studies that track people over time. That way, we can get a clearer picture of how these things actually work and whether interventions like mindfulness truly change who we are. It's a reminder that sometimes, even with interesting findings, we need to be very careful about what the data can truly tell us about cause and effect, especially when the things we're measuring are so closely tangled together. So, what is my take on this? I love that this paper is calling for more precision and caution in how we interpret psychological research. The Jangle fallacy is a real problem. When we have too many similar concepts with different names, it can indeed make the field messy and confusing, both for researchers and for people trying to use these findings to improve their lives. It's exciting to think that mindfulness might help us with neuroticism, but we need robust evidence to back up those claims before we call it a proven pathway. Future research needs to untangle these threads carefully, perhaps using longitudinal studies that watch people over months or years, or even experiments where people are randomly assigned to mindfulness training. That is how we can start to build a stronger understanding of how our minds and our personalities are connected and how we can make meaningful positive changes. What do you all think? Do you find the ideas of mindfulness and neuroticism to be very similar in your own experience? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please hit that like button. Subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained simply, and share this video with anyone you think might find it interesting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.